Thank you, Chancellor. Appreciate this wonderful honor. I want to thank the HAAS family for this wonderful award. Being a San Franciscan, I know what the HAAS family means to San Francisco. I have gone to the HAAS Arena and watched basketball games. I have gone to, when the HAAS owned the Ace, I went to see the Bash Brothers. Many branches of the HAAS family. We've gone to Stern Grove where we had clinic events with Hardly Strictly Bluegrass. We do the medical services. Doug Goldman, for example, was a volunteer physician at our clinic. We had a close relationship with Warren Hellman. And in fact, Rock Medicine will be doing the Willie Nelson concert tonight. So if any of you are there and happen to have a bad trip, we'll take care of it. So I want to thank you, Mimi, and the HAAS family for all your contributions. The HAAS family is legendary in San Francisco, and one of the things that I like in reading about them, if you live in San Francisco, you read about them all the time. They say that the HAAS family lives well, but not to excess. What a wonderful slogan for people in this day and age where philosophy is evolving as greed is good, ignore your neighbor, fight healthcare reform. You got to take care of yourself. You got to support your family. But when that's done, contribute to the public good. And the HAAS family is very much of a role model for that. It's a very special evening or day for me. I have people I went to high school with. In fact, Tom Alexander in the audience was our student body president. He's a graduate of the HAAS Business School, and Peter was a lecturer there. So we have many connections. So on behalf of my wife, my family, the staff of our clinic, and UC Berkeley that worked so hard to put this together, and particularly my granddaughter Lauren. She's here today, very special. We're going to be going to the Giants baseball game tomorrow, and she looks very beautiful. Papa loves you, Lauren. When I stepped on this campus in 1958, little did I believe that anything like this could happen. In fact, when my wife Millicent was getting me ready this morning, people that know our family know that Millicent runs the show. Everything I have on, she selected. I said, we worked so hard to make this day happen. And she says, David, you've worked hard all your life to make this day happen. So I love you, Millicent, and thank you for everything. My grandparents were farm workers from Oklahoma, Hugo, Oklahoma. They settled in the Central Valley. They followed the fruit. My grandmother in the 30s, in the midst of the Great Depression, worked in the fields overtime to send my mother to nursing school. And she said, David, it was humiliating. They would say to my grandmother, what can you do? And she said, we'll do anything. She says, David, never say you'll do anything. Say you're something. Say you're a doctor or a something. Never say you'll do anything. So that's my background. Depression era. Turns out I was connected with some relatives in Oklahoma. I'm 7th, 8th Cherokee, or 7th, 8th Irish, 1/8 Cherokee Indian. My great-grandmother was a full-blooded Cherokee Indian. That's why I don't drink. It's firewater to me. My way up was public education. I came up in the era, the golden era of public education. Governor Brown. In fact, I'm privileged to have the grandchildren of Governor Pat Brown in the audience today. Andy Clark and Carol Clark. That was the era that I came up, where people of my background had an access on the way up. In fact, I just had the privilege of watching this movie on Cesar Chavez. I would urge you to watch it because that's where I came from. I cut grapes, packed fruit, worked in 110-degree weather next to the migrant workers. Didn't have to motivate us to go to school, just stick us out in the field in 110-degree weather at subpar wages, and that's all we wanted to do, was not do this anymore. But we had access to public education. In fact, if you watch the movie Cesar Chavez, you will see where I came from, Delano. Lindsay, where my grandparents worked in the packing shed. In fact, I have a fellow I went to high school with, Jimmy Hill, in the audience. We worked in the same fields. We worked for the railroad. We came out of that same background. Jimmy went to San Jose State. I went to UC Berkeley. People of my background then had access to public education. We could move up the ladder because we had political leadership that supported public education. My mother died in 1956. My father died in 1960. I had no brothers or sisters. Historians have said I was an orphan. I didn't feel like an orphan. Even though I grew up alone, I had school. In fact, Berkeley became my family. When my father died, I spent the entire summer here. I didn't feel alone. I had school. School was everything to me. And I always emphasize what happens if people of my background that can contribute to the things that Chancellor Dirks described do not have the opportunity to move up the ladder. So this is one of the reasons I entitled my presentation Public Service and Public Education, because education has what got me started, but it wasn't education that got me into public service. Education gave me the tools, and I can assure you I had no interest in public service. I just wanted academic freedom and financial success and not to work in the fields anymore, not work for the railroad. That was my way up. I'm a product of the 60s. The 60s are what changed my consciousness. I recall attending a graduation here with Governor Pat Brown and with President Kennedy, in which he had just came up with the inspiring talk, don't ask what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And suddenly, some public consciousness started to bubble up in my mind. That place I came from, that segregated environment that I came from, where I worked side by side with the migratory farm workers, but we never questioned what an awful life they had. We got paid the same that they did. We didn't have any health care benefits, but we knew we had a way up. They didn't. And suddenly you started questioning all of this. What really transformed me and what I lived through was the free speech movement here at Berkeley, Mississippi Freedom Riders that went down. I found out I went to medical school at UCSF and graduate school at in pharmacology. I became a local drug expert living in the Haight when suddenly the biggest drug revolution in history occurred at my front door. And I found that walking home at night, I learned more than I was in school. This is the first time I found out. Remember, I'm third generation Californian. My cousin Marilyn is in the audience. We grew up together. We go way back to the early 20th century in California. I didn't know about segregated health care. I didn't know that the blacks got health care here and the whites got there. I didn't know, I was raised in subtle racism, but I didn't know about this extreme racism. So that was the consciousness changing of the 60s. My involvement in public service really came out of that. And one of the things that they have asked that I do is to give messages to the students. And the students is, you've got to go to school, get your education, learn your tools, but your commitment to public service occurs in the community. And when you go into the community now, you go into an environment in which they say greed is good, don't take care of your neighbor, everybody for themselves. The thing that's exciting to me is you're starting to see a change in even the education. I didn't get this. Here at UC Berkeley, you have Robert Reich, which Inequality for All. You're having encoded into the education public consciousness and contribution to public service. That's one of the reasons I applaud the HAAS family. In other words, reward the people that make a decision that they're going to serve the good. So I started the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic in response to this crisis. $100 from a lecture and $500 from the church. A lot of opposition from the medical establishment. My classmates thought I went off the rail. Probably did. But we had a life expectancy of about 3 months. And then miracles started to happen. And one of those miracles was Bill Graham. Representatives of the Bill Graham Foundation are here. I see Bob Barsotti in the back. Danny Shear is here. Now, one reflects on why people that are driven for success in life do things out of character. And you have to look at their background. Bill was a Holocaust survivor. He walked out of Europe. He carried that discrimination with him. And when he entered into this environment and he saw a clinic like ours, he actually came over to the Haight-Ashbury Clinic and said, "You're a good cause and we're going to support you." And he's the one that organized all those benefits. Organized those benefits before we got any financial support from the establishment. So you can make a very persuasive case that our free clinic would serve as the founding of the free clinic movement nationwide and was the inspirational philosophy behind healthcare as a right, not a privilege, and addiction medicine was built on rock and roll. And that people like Bill Graham and others, the bands, Janis Joplin, Grateful Dead, Carlos Santana, that was when music was part of the culture. Now this has all been chronicled in a wonderful book called Season of the Witch. Incredibly turbulent time. That's what the era that I lived through. And again, we're in that era where public education is under attack, but we have another Brown leading it. Jerry Brown, son of Pat Brown, had fought hard to get support for public education. We're moving in a direction of a two-tiered educational system which would cut people like me out. Now I made it, but what of all those young people that have the ability, but not the access? So I incorporate public education and public service. One of the most important things that's happened in my life is Vitka Eisen. Vitka, as pointed out in the video, went to the Haight-Ashbury Clinic to deal with her drug problem we were there for. She then went to Walden House, therapeutic community that started out of our same era. Then she went to San Francisco State Public School, got her degree. Then she went to Harvard, got a doctorate, came back, became head of the Walden House, and then came in and saved the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic. It's now Health Right 360, the largest private nonprofit medical addiction treatment program in the state of California. Sees 50,000 patients a year, all over the state. Without public education, she wouldn't have made it. So again, when you keep looking at the roots of service to our community, you look at public education, public service, and recovery. My wife, Millicent Buxton, who's been in recovery from heroin for 37 years, started the first Narcotics Anonymous meeting at our Haight-Ashbury Clinic. Recovery is a very powerful tool, and one that has to be incorporated and emphasized in the dialogue. And I mention that to the students because There is a dark side to campus life. And I tell the students, watch your back. The drug problem is much worse now than it was in the beginning. The leading cause of death of adolescent and young adults is prescription drug and heroin overdose. This is not a thing of the past. When Faulkner says, past history is not dead and buried, and it's not in the past. We're in the middle of a major drug epidemic that is hitting young people with great fury, and it is hitting this campus, UC Berkeley campus. Millicent, when she had a monitoring practice, we had UC students in treatment. Our recovery house, Plaza House, that Steve Levine runs, and Richard Frank is the director through our Smith Family Foundation. We have a student from UC in there right now. But the marvelous thing about recovery is these horrible things can happen, and then you end up better than you were before. Our minister Cecil Williams says that sometimes you have to go into the forest of the dark before you see the light. That's what recovery is. Shine the light on the darkness. And when we talked with this student at our Plaza House meeting this last week, he said that he is participating in a student-wide effort, not only here at UC, but through all the campuses, dealing with the alcohol and drug problem on the UC on the university campus, not just UC, but throughout the system. And one of the great things that's happening is there's now a recovery track. They're starting recovery houses on the college campus. Now, we live in a world filled with drugs. I'm not going to question these broad issues. It's a world that troubles me for our granddaughter Lauren. But for those that are casualties of addiction, particularly people like me, we have to give them an avenue back into the mainstream. And again, without public education, you wouldn't have people like myself, you wouldn't have people like Vitka. That is the way we got back into the mainstream and continue to contribute to the national dialogue. So, I just came from a national conference of addiction medicine. I'm one of the grandfathers of the field of addiction medicine. I'm past president of the American Society of Addiction Medicine, and the scientific advances are absolutely amazing in terms of brain science. We've got a number of UCSF faculty in the audience here that are my colleagues that are on the forefront of brain science. So philosophers said the most interesting questions are the questions that have not been asked. The students have a wonderful opportunity in the future to answer some of the most vexing scientific questions of our time. I had some exposure to that through my colleague Andy Clark with his project Strategic Aid Partners. We're working with substance abuse AIDS in Africa, working with an individual who has a technology in which you can take a drop of blood from a patient in Africa, put it on a smartphone, send it back here, do a readout of the blood, including whether they're positive for HIV, dengue fever, the next phase of flu, model the molecule and send it back so that you can initiate treatment. Incredible technology. And one of the crucial aspects of that is you could say, well, you have AIDS in Africa, what does that have to do with us? Well, these epidemics are worldwide. And if you interrupt the epidemic of flu or some other viral-borne disease before it hits our area, then you can prevent the epidemic. So these are very few reflections on the incredible scientific advances and the challenges that young people can enter into. But one of the crucial aspects is, as President Obama said, the streams of history will be dictated by youth. In other words, it can go in a positive direction or it can go in a negative direction. Whether all young people have an opportunity to participate in dictating those streams of history will be dependent on where many of us have access to public education. And again, I credit the university for giving me the opportunity, credit the public education system in my beloved state of California for giving us all opportunity, and I credit Mimi HAAS for rewarding those of us that have made a commitment for public service. As it said in the movie, when looking at that life of mine and all those turbulent ups and downs, it's been a long, strange trip. I borrowed that from the Grateful Dead. But I want to close with the universal slogan of anybody that went to Cal. And this came up, my wife and I went to Cabo. We're avid whale watchers and scuba divers. We were there as a result of that wonderful woman, Catherine Holmes, who gave us her condo. Had a great time. When we were in the lobby, there's a bunch of Cal students there from the Peter HAAS Business School. Now, Chancellor, their interest was not in public education and public service. Their interest was more in partying and surviving spring break, but we all bonded. And we talked, and they had their Cal stuff on, and we closed with the thing that unites us across the generations. Go Bears!